And next up on our agenda for the day, we have a presentation from Cindy Wendell. And I see we are joined by a lot of familiar faces, and it's wonderful to see you all with us. But I'm going to hand it over to Cindy to do introductions, and feel free to unmute, and the floor is yours.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Chair and Commissioners. Really appreciate the invitation again to once again come before you and give you some information regarding some of the CARES Act dollars that were allocated by you. I want to thank all of you again for giving us this time, and there are many familiar faces on here, and I do want to Alicia will introduce the rest of our attendees, but I do want to make sure that everyone knows Alicia Benson is here with us with GSI. And I'll be presenting the first couple of slides on this presentation, and then Alicia will be coordinating the rest of the presentation. So Ron, if you want to start on our first slide, we can get going here today on what exactly the part of the CARES Act funding we are going to be talking about today.
Cindy, just want to double check that we do have everybody that has been allowed in as a panelist that is supposed to be. Is there anybody still waiting in the waiting room, or is this everybody you need?
I think we're good. The only one I do not see right now is Lauren Nissen, to make sure she is here. And
okay,
if you can look for Lauren.
We'll keep an eye out for Lauren, and if she jumps into the waiting room, we'll promote her.
Perfect. Thank you. Yep. Well, the first, again, we wanted to bring your attention here to today, the Business and Nonprofit Grant Report. And if you, one thing I want to bring your attention to is the bottom of the screen are the number of entities that over time, as we went from one program to the next, the coalition grew. And so that is a theme that you will see today among many is we're very proud of the number of people and entities that designated time and resources to make this this resource available to our public. Next slide. And so today is really talking about the #1 priority bucket that the commissioners allocated out to the public, which is business and nonprofit grants and marketing. So you'll see the total of the pie of CARES dollars was a little over $33.5 million. Over to the right, you will see how that is actually made up a little bit more. Part of that $10.4 million, 4.5 of that were the marketing dollars that we talked about a couple weeks ago. And the other part of that is the direct contracts that the Spokane County partnered with other nonprofits for some of our other grants that we did direct from the county. So that is included in that $10.4 million. Then you'll see the a little over $23 million. That represents the grant amounts that were directly allocated into the community through the two different nonprofit and business grant programs that we will talk about next. Next slide. And those two programs included the Open Together program, which was run last summer in 2020, and then later on last year, the Hospitality Relief Grant Program. So a couple things I wanted to make sure that we pointed out about these two programs is what's really important is the original allocation that was presented to the commissioners was a little over 10 million, was at 10 million for the Open Together program and a little over 10 million for the Hospitality Relief Grant. And you'll notice that we ended up at more than that in the direct allocations that you wanted for the community, which is quite amazing, honestly, because looking back, the information was presented to you. The additional funding then went to fund every single eligible application that came before us. And that is something I think that we can be very proud of. And that way there were it was not a first come, first served grant program. Everybody that applied that was eligible was funded. And so that is why you'll see the amounts for those programs more than the original ask amount as we came back to you with the request and you funded the additional amount. There were a couple of things that we learned along the way that changed from Open Together to Hospitality Relief Grant. One is that you'll notice the Open Together program had a $10,000 limit, and we did include sole proprietors in that program. The origination date was about March 1st of 2019, and the FTE size was a little bit lower. On the Hospitality Relief Grant, we switched gears and targeted that. We were one of the first entities in the state before the actual Department of Commerce did this, your county did this, to target the hospitality sector. We knew that they were struggling, and in a partnership with many others came up with the idea for this grant program. raised the limit to $20,000 and included a higher FTE count so we could incorporate some of your mid-sized businesses in the county. And again, that was really fun because more and more partners came on board with that program. And so I think that you'll see that was an evolution of learning and growing and what we could do for this community and the partnerships there. So like I said earlier, collaboration was key, bringing on a lot of partners, and then recognizing some of the things we wanted to do. And one of those things was more direct outreach. And so Alicia will take you through the rest of the program now and talk about some of those partnerships and some of the outcomes. So welcome, Alicia and team.
Thanks, Cindy, and good afternoon. Great to see all of you, and thanks, commissioners, for having us in today. I want to take just a second to recognize, although you know most of them, but just who else is here, and we'll be a couple of them will be speaking to components of the presentation, and then we have the rest of the team here who can answer specific questions as well. So joining us today is Lance Beck and Colin Tracy from the Greater Spokane Valley Chamber of Commerce, Shelley O'Quinn and Lauren Neeson and Molly Sanchez from the Inovia Foundation, and Stacia Rasmussen and Kara Kuhn from our team here at GSI. And then Cindy, which you all know, spent the first part of her time working here at GSI on the first set of grant programs and then transitioned over to the role at the county. And that's been integral in some of the continuity as well. And so this group that's here today has been the core team throughout this effort and bringing the grants to life that we've been honored to do. And so I'm looking forward to sharing some of the impact and also your questions at the end as we continue to think forward on the needs for our community. If you'll go to the next slide, Ron, please. So this slide as we were putting it together, gave us all a lot of pause when we think about all that's been accomplished over the course of the year. And there's a couple of pieces that we want to point out at the front end of this conversation as we look at this slide. The first is getting a feel and a capture of the timeline that everything occurred across and your investments and the CARES grant investments that were happening here in our region. And then to Cindy's comments earlier, the partners that have been so critical throughout this effort and throughout our response. And so a couple of things I want to note, really the differentiators for the work that we've done here in Spokane County. The first is our partners. It has been incredible, the partners that have come to the table from the very get-go to be part of this work and thinking outside the box as we've met the needs and the response for our small businesses and nonprofits throughout the community. The partners that are here on this slide have been engaged from the very beginning in the entirety of the process. And that includes, which is hard to see on the slide, but the list of all of the organizations that were part of the external review processes for the Open Together grant program and the hospitality grant program. These individuals and organizations from the design of the program to the intent, looking to eliminate barriers and ensure that we were increasing access for every small business and nonprofit throughout the county, was really critical to the design and implementation and the continual iteration of that work as we move through the grant processes and the grant opportunities. Additionally, I think what's just important to note too, which we're not going to go into as much today, but the administrative costs that were associated with this grant program, those dollars went to support these organizations that are here on the slide, who either are entirely located in Spokane County or have a branch of their operation here in Spokane County. And so those dollars were invested from an administrative cost recovery standpoint to employers here in Spokane County as well and their employees. And you'll hear in just a moment from Lance and Shelley that Inovia Foundation and the Greater Spokane Valley Chamber of Commerce have been our two key subcontractors throughout all three grant processes. And so their teams and their systems and the design have been instrumental to the work. And so Lance and Shelley are going to walk through some of that in just a minute. The other key differentiator before I hand it over has been something that we didn't realize when we set out to do this work, which was in such a kind of emergency reaction mode to the environment we found ourselves in. But the timeline highlights it now as we have the opportunity to go back and reflect. And that's that at each month throughout this response, we had a touch point and a flow of funds to our small businesses and nonprofits throughout the region. And that the county's investments strategically ended up following, cascading in between some of these other investments that were happening for their local municipalities and or from the state of Washington through the Department of Commerce. And so that allowed us to be able to have this stream and cascading effect of relief to our small businesses and nonprofits that allowed to help to stabilize and bridge some of their needs. And it's unique. And I think that that's one of the things I want to commend the county and the commissioners on, is that it's unique that you made these types of investments into our small businesses and nonprofits here in Spokane County. And the early data that we're starting to see from this is showing that that intentional response and the dollars that we were able to flow to our small business and nonprofit community, we're starting to see that we had less small business closures than some of our peers across the state. And that we were able to bring some of that much needed relief. And that was your commitment and willingness to invest those dollars towards this much needed part of our economy. And so we're looking forward to getting a little bit more of that data as we get a little bit out of this and have some of that reflection. But those early and consistent investments are proving out to be really critical to how Spokane County is able to begin to build our rebound and our recovery here in the region. And so what I want to do is hand it off to Shelley and Lance, who are going to talk through a little bit of the impacts of this work across the course of this past year. So Lance and Shelley, over to you.
Thank you, Alicia. And I know Shelley, I think you're unmuted now too. Ron, you can go to the next slide, please. One thing that I wanted to touch on, just to reiterate the partnership, the program design that took place for our first program, it should be noted that we rolled that over and actually use that same program design in the Spokane Valley Cares 1 and 2. The numbers you'll see reflected here do not include the numbers that came out of that Spokane Valley Cares program, but very much that program was possible in part because of the county's investment in the development of the Open Together grant program from the beginning. So some additional dollars investment based off of that program design did take place, which is really great. So this first slide that we're going to show you here is just the disbursement of the grants. And so one piece I know that we talked about in our initial conversations with the commissioners here was that we wanted to see these funds spread throughout Spokane County. And so from the far northwest corner, a wedding venue up there, to a small restaurant in the extreme southeast corner, to Mount Spokane Ski and Snowboard Park up there in the northeast corner. The funds really were distributed. Obviously, we have a core of business around the city of Spokane, Spokane Valley, Liberty Lake, and Airway Heights area there. But we did have grant recipients from each corner of the county, which was really exciting to see when we put this to a visual form here. So you can see the program grant totals awarded there, and in total 1,819 grants were awarded. That is in part, I believe, just over 1,500 unique businesses. So we did have some overlap with the hospitality program that ran later, but still in total over 1,500 unique businesses received grants. I think we can go. You there, Shelley?
I'm here, and I just wanted to say good afternoon to so many familiar faces, and a big thank you to our commissioners for letting us join you today. I love this map because I know for the three of you and for the county team, seeing the representation throughout the county is so important to not just have it in the cities that we serve. And I do want to point out for the 191 nonprofits that were served, while they are primarily located in the city of Spokane and Spokane Valley, that's just the nature of their core. They do serve strategically throughout the entire Spokane County. So, but this map is an incredible representation geographically of the reach we were able to have through these programs.
We can go to the next slide, Ron. And so along with the dispersion being countywide, one of the key stats that we pulled out here was our FTE count pre-COVID here for these employers. And so over 17,000 employees of these businesses are represented in these grant awards. And then I'll let Shelley talk to the majority owner aspect here as well.
So we didn't want to have just geographic representation, but we will also want to ensure that we were reaching out to small business owners and nonprofits, which, by the way, you may hear me say that interchangeably, because our nonprofits actually are small businesses as well. They have employees, and their product happens to be the service they provide to all of us. So You'll hear me say that interchangeably, but we want to not just have the geographic representation, but also ensure that we were reaching out to our minority populations, women-owned businesses, tribal-owned companies, and then veterans. And so we did track this in the Open Together program. We asked this question. And so you can see both for small businesses and nonprofits, we asked the question about their executive director or CEO and how they identify. Thankfully, we were able to, through the generosity of the commissioners and your allocation of dollars, we were able to fund all of the eligible applications, as Cindy said, so we did not have to prioritize, but we still felt like this was an important call out.
And additionally, to note that those call outs there do just represent the numbers from the Open Together grant program, not the hospitality program as well. You can go to the next slide, Ron. And then we knew sector specific data was important. And so we've listed off the 10 top NAICS codes here that were represented throughout the two programs. And so obviously there is a sway in accommodation and food services due to the fact that we ran a program specific to those sectors. But you'll see personal services, retail trade, healthcare, arts and entertainment, recreation, manufacturing, professional, scientific, and technical services, construction, real estate, and transportation and warehousing were the top categories that came back. We do have quite a few under that as well that represented smaller numbers. And then additionally on the nonprofit side, rather than using the NAICS codes to separate these groups, we broke them into their own categories here. So I'll let Shelley touch on that piece.
We do categorize our nonprofits differently. And so I actually thought I would just give you some examples so you knew how they fall under the different categories. Health and Human Services would be, for example, our Catholic Charities or CHAZ. The arts and culture would be like the MAC or the Symphony or Terrain. Education and youth development, think the Boys and Girls Club. Recreation, sports and facilities, that could be like Bloomsday or Hoop Fest, which we all know are economic drivers to our region and took significant hits. And then community improvement and development would be, for example, our the different community centers throughout the county. So those are just examples of how we break it down. And these were our top, the 5 areas that we were funding. And
then additionally in the Open Together program, we had the sole proprietors broken out in their own category. And so you'll see 16.7% of those awards were made to sole proprietors as well. And so next slide, Ron. In the program, we did ask for where businesses projected to spend the grant funds. And so while we don't have data on where they actually ended up spending it, that would be needed in a follow-up engagement with the businesses. We do have leading into the program, we did have an idea of where the need was going to be the highest. And so you can see on the applications, rent and mortgage payments funneled up to the top along with payroll, utilities. PPE was kind of in the middle along with vendor invoices, debt services, and then other related COVID related expenses finished it out there. And so a high level of need obviously on just maintaining their storefront payments for the rent and mortgage side, as well as utilities there as well. And so uniquely, utilities didn't have a great direct programming assist to it for the business community. And so we've seen that reflected in reports from our utility providers as well, that there is quite a backlog growing in that area still to date at this point. Shelley, did you have more on this one? Or
no, the same is reflected through the similar through the nonprofit side.
Okay, so next slide, Ron. So then continuing on these impacts, when we looked at the program, the Open Together program here, we saw an average loss of revenue. Now that was equated over this date span, so projected lost revenue there of an average of over $176,000 per business was reported. A combined total from the applicant pool of over $104 million of lost revenue here. And then as we looked at the lost revenue projections for the hospitality sector, note that the date span does increase a month as this program ran later. We were able to extend out those dates for the request on this data. So an average of $347,000 in lost revenue over March 1 through September 30th. totaling in total for that program to over $252 million in lost revenue in that sector. So the need was substantial, as identified by these numbers, obviously.
So on the nonprofit side, you know, as soon as COVID hit, our nonprofits shut down. And if you've all been to events in April, right? It's one of the busiest fundraising event months in Spokane, and they were all shut down. And so our nonprofits lost the ability to bring in revenue through their fundraising events, through events that they often hosted to that would actually be income revenue. So we asked our nonprofits to tell us revenue lost March 1st through June 30th, and that was around 13 million. And then we asked them to project out what their loss would be between July 1st and December 30th. And you can see that that number is over 26 million in net losses. And again, if you think about the impact of our nonprofits that they have on this community, not being able to host fundraisers, not being able to host events like Bloomsday or the Hub, they host their sporting events. They're all revenue drivers for and have an economic impact on our region. And so the commissioner's investment into our nonprofits and small business has been critical, as you can see, to offset some of this loss.
Next slide, Ron. So the next couple slides, this first one really focusing on the need that we saw within the business community. And so as part of the applications, we had both the need and then use of funds and how they would break those down. And so just these three businesses that we're highlighting here really go to help visualize a couple things. One, it didn't matter where in the county you were located, you were facing challenges as a business. Two, it didn't matter what sector you were in, you were going to face challenges. And so we have a Deer Park restaurant, a Valley small healthcare focused boutique organization here, and a construction group out of the Airway Heights area. And so additionally, to note, funds that were received as part of these grant programs were typically ending up being part of a funding portfolio that a business would have taken advantage of. So while they may have been lucky enough to receive one of these grants, they also likely took out a PPP loan. They likely found additional grant revenues to make ends meet during this time. And so as you can see, it doesn't matter what sector you're in or where you were located, you certainly were impacted. Certainly reading over 2,000 of these applications, everyone had a story of need that was so very obvious. And so again, thank you so much for making these funds available to the businesses. We can go to next slide, Ron. And then along with the need comes the gratitude, obviously. And so as the receipt of the funds went out, the heartwarming thanks came in from across the county. And I'm gonna share one story that stuck out to me. It was a little longer than what we put on the screen here. And so we had a business, if you recall the timing of our hospitality program, those awards ended up hitting mailboxes around the week of Christmas. And so it was right at the end of the year. You also can recall that was following on another shutdown from the governor on the heels of a shutdown when we thought we were going the other way, and we actually ramped operations back down for a period of another 8 weeks. And so we had a restaurant reach out to us, and unfortunately they had not seen their grant email come through that they had been awarded. And so this individual reached out, left us a voicemail. We followed up with them, and the conversation went something along this lines where they just were following up on our grant request, asking if they could find out if they had not been awarded. They just really needed to know. Unfortunately, they assumed they had not been awarded a grant from not receiving a message on that evening. And our staff member went through the database, quickly realized that we had awarded them a grant, and so asked if they could check their spam email folder, and gave them the email address they were looking for. And as this individual was finding this email and quickly identified, oh yes, I do have a message, relayed, the phone went silent for a moment, and you'd almost hear the person reading as there was just dead air on the moment. And they came back on right about the point in the letter when it says in the sum of, and they just started crying on the phone to our staff member. And the wave of thank yous, probably 100 or so of those came through next. And just the moment of saying this makes such a difference at this moment. And they were just hoping to be able to pay their staff for the one more week of work to be able to get them through the Christmas holiday, and the difference this made. As I can tell from a individual who works so closely on this and the team on the line, as we read through that story, even now being 3 months down the line, it's a hard one to get through without having yourself get a little choked up. And those feelings were very raw in that moment, be it the holidays, be it the timing of it, be it the fact that it was just one of 700 plus for that program that came so perfectly timed for an industry that had experienced so much loss in this pandemic, that this is just one story that we were able to share, and it certainly we'd love to forward all of these on to you and give you the chance to have the opportunity to read all of them, because these programs made a difference, and they kept businesses alive very much. And so just again, from me as having the privilege to work on this, thank you. And I can only say that the community echoes that thanks in the recipients group. So I'll pass it off to Shelley for the nonprofit side.
Perfect. And if you can go to the next slide, that'd be great. So I think it's important that we not just focus on the numbers, because behind the numbers are actually the true stories and impact. And so I just wanted to share with you just 3 nonprofits so that you can understand the impact of COVID had, and just how your contribution and allocating dollars to our small business and nonprofits help them address their need. So the first one I picked because I know that the county is closely connected with the Hub Sports Center is the Hub Sports Center. You know, their mission is to connect and partner with communities of faith and education and sports and government around the community to positively impact the life of youth through sports and events, and to enhance their life skills. And they had to shut down in March, and they had to cancel over 90% of their planned activities. And so they saw an immediate decline in their revenue through canceling events and through program revenue, so over 100,000 through events and program revenue. And it was through this grant that they were able to continue to pay their bills and keep the doors open, because there's still a fixed cost to maintain that facility, even if it's empty. And so here's just an example of a nonprofit working closely with our youth that you were able to directly impact. Next slide. This is Terrain. Terrain is an arts and culture organization that works to ensure artists, makers, and culture creators thrive in the Inland Northwest. They too are driven by their revenue model is through events that support their artists, through a retail center, a gallery space, and they actually do window dressings and have a creative entrepreneur program, professional development piece. All of those were shut down. So again, here is another organization, nonprofit, serving our artists and arts and culture community, and 94% of their revenue streams were cut off overnight. And so just an example of how you were able to help another nonprofit serving, and actually serving as an economic driver. Their economic impact in our region is over $2 million through the events that they hold. And so to be able to support them and help them keep their doors open this last year has been critical. And then the last one I wanted to highlight is Big Table. And Big Table is a nonprofit that actually serves our hospitality workers and restaurant workers. And next slide, please. And there we go. And as we all know, it was our hospitality workers that were hardest hit immediately. And so they actually, in their application, they said that in Spokane, almost 60% of those working in the industry lost their jobs overnight. And this is, so remember, this is in the first in the first application, so before June, and only about 20% of those were hired back. I mean, that was just incredible in those first 3 months, and we know that that industry has continued to struggle. Yet here, Big Table, so they went from being connecting their the hospitality sector with resources to suddenly they themselves were faced with this tsunami of new referrals. At the same time, they lost the resources from their industry partners and their event revenue. And so to be able to fund the staff for their organization, and then also to be able to have them serve and connect our hospitality workers, which were so hard hit during COVID, to be able to allow them to continue to do their work to provide support for an industry in great need. I mean, these are just 3 nonprofits that we know are critical to our community and to the economic drivers of our region that continue, we're able to continue because of your help keeping their doors open.
So as we close, if we can go to the last slide, Ron. I know we're pushing up on time, and so we wanted to leave you with a few takeaways, kind of collective from our work, and also really an open question to you as commissioners as we think ahead. As we think about 2020, it was definitely a year of economic triage. You can think about it as economic response, reaction, stabilization, survival, maybe finding that lifeline and creating that lifeline for our business and nonprofit community. 2021, it's shaping up to be a year of economic recovery and an opportunity to be slightly more proactive in our recovery and rebound planning. And so we wanted to make sure we highlighted a few things as we think about that planning and having a little bit more space to think ahead. And as we think about those investments. So a couple of key takeaways. First was our ability to partner gets us further. And we know that in Spokane, and we prove that out over and over again. And this response and these grants really highlights how critical this partnership was, and the fact of these investments that we've been able to make investments in our community. The stories that Lance and Shelley just shared really demonstrates that impact to those folks and employers and families here in our community. So continuing to think about partnership in important work as we go ahead. The second takeaway is around something that folks certainly like the Innovia Foundation, who are in the business of doing grants, know this, that the direct outreach is a requirement for program success. And I think this really relates to our third takeaway too, which is the need for more facts around businesses and nonprofits, is that throughout this entire process, businesses and many of our nonprofits aren't in the business of actually applying for grants. They've never done it before. And so the ability to access them becomes key in connecting them to the relief and resources that are available. We're continuing to see that. And so investments in that outreach become really important as we think about the partnerships to get it done, and the people power it takes to be able to demonstrate ongoing and direct outreach to our business and nonprofit community. The fourth takeaway, that our nonprofits and some of our small businesses too are going to continue to suffer revenue loss as we work through and towards recovery. They're not rebounding as quickly, and the community needs that many of them serve are continuing to increase. And so the continued importance of keeping that up in front of us as we move through this response and recovery is going to be essential for everyone. And then the last big takeaway is that we will continue to benefit from comprehensive funding assistance portfolios. Really, to my point on our businesses and nonprofits, the easier that we can make it for them to navigate the opportunities and the relief and the resources, the more we can continue to work together as businesses and nonprofits and philanthropy and municipal governments, the more impactful and beneficial it's going to be for our community, for our employers, and for their employees, because the simplification of things and the ability to layer investments helps them and helps our community faster. And so as we think ahead, as we think about the fact that we have many new dollars from the American Rescue Plan coming into the state of Washington and into our county, as we think about what we've been able to do this past year, we really want to turn it back over to you. I know we're short on time, but know that this group, we've been living and breathing this in the passion which you've heard shared throughout our time here with you today. We are ready to continue to stand alongside the county and our partners throughout the region to think about how do we continue to provide support, lifelines, and recovery for our community. So we want to know what your questions and your ideas are, and we have some too. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. A wonderful presentation. I would ask my seatmates, Commissioner French and Commissioner CUNY, please feel free to jump in with any comments or questions. But yeah, I just want to lead off with a fantastic presentation that was, and just thank you for what each and every one of you did. I mean, this is a rock star team that we've got on the Zoom call, and we wouldn't have been able to pull this off without each and every one of you and your involvement in this program.
Commissioners, are there any questions as they left, as Alicia alluded to in the last slide, things from your perspective, things that you would like to either ask about these numbers or even just feedback about going forward, things that you would like us to keep, you know, on the forefront as information to share as it's learned? Anything from you giving them feedback about this program and or looking forward?
Commissioner French?
Yeah, a great presentation. Any chance we could get a copy of the PowerPoint so that I can do a deeper dive into that and understand maybe a little bit more about some of the dynamics and what next phase looks like? You know, we know that there's more money coming, but we don't know what the guidelines are yet. So we're all anxious to see what kind of brackets the government's going to put around us as we try and get into recovery and stuff. But a nice job, and glad to see that you know, the money was used to help keep some businesses' doors open, which was what I think our collective goal was. You know, just get us through this, and we will be fine. So thank you.
And Cindy and Ron have a copy of the presentation, so we'll make sure you get it, Commissioner.
Commissioner CUNY.
So I just want to say thank you too. You know, similar to what Commissioner French said, it's just, you know, you guys worked really hard. You know, we were able to help provide the funding, but you guys figured out the mechanics of it and figured out how to get it out to the businesses. And that was definitely one of the things we talked about in the commissioner room, was that, you know, in getting money to these businesses to help them survive, helps them keep their employees working, helps keep them, you know, paying their mortgage, paying their rent, you know, so that's that multiplier effect that we were looking for. Just doing rent assistance, you know, and we did rent assistance as well. But it's that effect of keeping those businesses open provides those jobs for everybody. And so I think for me, you know, as we look to see what the guidance is for the next round, there's two things that I'd like to look at. I'd like to see what other counties did do now that kind of these stats are coming out, and seeing how we compared to other counties and keeping our businesses open, because I do think that we probably invested more than other counties as a proportion into our small businesses, and kind of seeing what our you know, unemployment rate is versus some of those other counties. And then looking at what are the needs moving forward. I know recently, Cindy and I had a meeting with the hospitality industry and the restaurant industry. And I mean, some restaurants are doing really well. I mean, fast food restaurants are doing better than they ever have. So, I mean, who knows if they're going to really open up their inside again. You know, but those are jobs that are lost forever, you know, for people that were working there. But what is that need that really is out there? Because we do want to continue to be strategic in investing in where the need is, and not just, you know, giving dollars away. I think that's going to be, you know, one of the things we really thought about during this round, is what can we do that was really strategic and thoughtful, and really had that effect that was going to be lasting, versus just a temporary effect. So those are some of the things that I think I'm thinking about as we look at what this next round of funding is. And the other piece is the cities are going to be getting way more than they did in the prior round. And so how do we look at that collectively and holistically, as well, that, you know, the county really got the bulk of the funding. So we really, you know, stayed on the forefront, but the cities are going to be getting, I think City of Spokane is almost as much as we are. So what does that look like? And I think since you guys have been out there, you know, kind of living this as the, you know, the people that were doing the mechanics of all of it, you know, what is that, what do you think about that? And how do we look at that as we move forward? So those are some of the thoughts and questions that I have. But really just a huge thank you to you guys, because again, you guys figured out the mechanics, which was, you know, new, innovative, you know, and how to get it out there, and have truly been a model for the rest of the state. So thank you for doing that, and really all of you coming together to make it happen, because, you know, it really was that partnership of all of you putting, you know, your specific areas aside and coming together, you know, for everyone. So thanks.
Commissioner Commissioner Kearns. Can I just, I would like to just jump in after Commissioner CUNY, and just, I'd be remiss if I didn't call out the team that's on the screen that really put in the hard work just behind the scenes. So a big thank you to Colin at Valley, you know, along with Lance, and to Kara and Stacia at GSI, and then Lauren and Molly on my team who are on this call. It truly, I mean, there were actually more beyond this in each of these organizations. We just didn't drag them into today's meeting, but I do have to just do a shout out and kudos to all of them for actually making this program happen as successfully as it did, because they put in the time and energy and went above and beyond to really put the I's, dot the I's and cross the T's for everyone. And then I do want to just say thank you to all three of you. So I know that the county often gets overlooked in many things, and I just have to say a big thank you for your leadership over this last year. I just truly believe the county stepped up and played an important role. And so I just want you to hear it from all of us that we just appreciate the role that the county played, and for your strategic investment into our community. And while we don't necessarily have those numbers yet, Commissioner CUNY, that you're looking for, I do believe that when we start seeing the data come out, and, you know, whether it's through the Labor Department or even we're partnering with the Arts Fund to see the impact on our arts and culture organizations, I believe that we're going to see the impact in our community that will be greater and different from others, because we did invest strategically in these organizations. So a big thank you for your investment in our community. And I do have to say, go Zags, because that's coming up.
Commissioner French.
Yeah, in addition to the great work you all did, I think the other thing that is something that I hope we can capture as we come out of this COVID environment is the resiliency that a lot of the folks in this community demonstrated, and also the fact that some of our manufacturers shifted their product mix to be able to generate products that the community needed. I mean, you know, Dryfly and their efforts and some of the others really demonstrated some not only creativity, but also a commitment to community that I don't know that all communities get to enjoy. But out of that, we also saw advanced manufacturers that were heavily involved in aerospace. And because of the Boeing 737 experience and stuff, you know, they had to shift their product mix. And so were there new market opportunities that evolved out of this kind of experience that are opportunities for us to grow in as we move forward out of this and stuff. So I'm hoping that you're looking at those opportunities and seeing how do we build our collective resilience to overcoming this as it ever happens again. Dear God, please don't. But also, how do we take advantage of this? What is it? Never waste a good disaster. Well, okay. What did we learn that will help build our resilience and stuff? So anyway, thank you.
Well, and Commissioner French, to that comment, we were just actually having that conversation earlier today, and I know at the height of it, we had, I think, somewhere between 60 and 70 manufacturers we were aware of who had shifted some types of their operations. And so to a lot of your questions, I think Lance said it towards the end of his remarks, the follow-up is the work that we have ahead. And so some conversation that we're having, be interested for all of you on the outreach to some of these entities. on the after, what does it look like now, is some of the work ahead, as we, which I think will be really critical for how everybody in the region is thinking about their investments and new investments, or doubling down on investments with new funds coming in. And so that's, I think, a conversation we'd be really interested in having with all of you and any others as we think about the follow-up and kind of the surveying and data collection on the back end. And I think both components, because I think both components would be really important to your comments on manufacturing as well.
Well, the world wouldn't have been ours if we knew how to produce toilet paper. I mean, there's just opportunities.
Well, I just want to say thank you for what you all did. Thank you for being here today. The numbers look great today. I mean, by seeing how many businesses we helped, how many families that were helped in this, and I think as the numbers continue to be crunched and long term, and we look back on this, I think we're going to see that this was an even greater lifeline to our community than it appears it was even today. So. Thank you all so much for being with us today. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for being a part of this huge epic endeavor that we did to help so many in our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have
you.
a great day.
Those eggs.